I'm Martin Catherall. I'm a data platform MVP, originally from the UK. Lived down this part of the world for quite a long time. I've been at New Zealand, moved to New Zealand in 2000, and I've been in Australia for the last 5 years. So, introduction. What are we going to talk about? Well, we'll talk about 3 things really. Just basically our knowledge of data privacy, security, tech issues even, make some comparisons between privacy stuff and tech stuff. There's a lot of analogies to be made, and I think they're actually quite valuable to compare things to. We'll talk about some good practice. What is good practice? Notice I didn't say best practice, because if something was best practice, I kind of think it'd be something everyone did all the time. And we'll see some tooling. And that's not just tooling that exists in the product. It might be tooling that you write yourself. Might be tooling that exists from a third party like Redgate. So we're going to dive into, I think, about 3 demos during the next hour. I'll try not to put you to sleep. But there's some themes that I'll probably run through the presentation. And one's really something that isn't really totally relevant to privacy and security, and that just sustainability of applications. And this is something we should think about from a tech perspective, as well as a privacy security perspective. It's so easy to get things wrong nowadays. And when we get things wrong, they can have dire consequences for our business. It's easy for people to, see you've had a security breach, privacy incident or something, and just go to another bank or another car dealership or another anything you like. And that can have serious consequences for you and your business. One of the tools we'll talk about is metadata, specifically tagging. And we'll see this in the Azure portal later on, and probably in a Redgate tool itself towards the end of the hour. And productivity, tooling that makes us productive, but processes. So this isn't just about tooling, it is about processes. And where there's a process, there needs to be kind of a good culture. Culture can often override process. If you think about anything, driving on the road or anything like that, there's obviously processes that you follow. And in that example, we followed them the vast majority of the time. But I don't know, the culture might be to cut corners here, do things that you shouldn't do. But it's kind of just accepted. And we get into a lot of that areas in IT. And that can really detract from a good process. And taking inspiration from other things, just looking around us. I just wanted to touch on something, question Hamish asked in the last session now, what is something that what piece of advice would you give to people who are starting in tech today? I think one of the things that I'd say was, it's not just about tech. In fact, probably it's more about people. So if you think of, I don't know, any kind of business you like, it doesn't have to be a tech business, it wouldn't exist without people. And so we need to make our processes, our applications or whatever, easy for people to use. So we want them to be private, we want them to be secure, but we don't want that to be an impediment to people using our products, because without people making them, using them, paying for them, we basically wouldn't be making them at all. So let's push on, and let's just talk about some knowledge to start off with. And I think it's important when we learn things that we really understand what we're doing, not just that we click a couple of buttons and things happen, but that we actually know how to get out of things and all the like. Because as we learn, we develop. And there's a lot of change going on in the world at the moment in privacy and security, in just life in general. And I think one of the things we might have to change is our attitudes to So things like auditing and monitoring, these are there to, early warning signals that we can use to make our apps better. Sometimes we don't even know about security breaches, privacy breaches until they've happened. And at that point, it's probably a bit too late. What we'd like to know is, we need to know about them before. Is there some sort of telltale sign that's, that's indicating something's a bit weak? Sometimes people are into our applications for months or even years before we actually know that they've been there. They've been snooping around, doing this and that, and totally oblivious to it. And in some cases, we don't even know about it until it appears in the newspapers or on the dark web. But if we had monitoring in place, we might be alerted to that sooner. And I tend to find that, team members and that, they think that auditing, monitoring, that sort of thing is there to catch you out. And that's might have been the case in the past, but I think things should change. Attitudes should change. It's there to help the business. And you should look at it as a learning process. If your monitoring's picked up that, there's activity on a table that shouldn't be there, well, that's an opportunity to go fix it. Look at why that is. Why is that happening? And maybe close the loop, do something about it. Maybe there's a good reason it is happening. But to investigate and change your monitoring, put things in place so it doesn't happen again. So that is one of the first things I'd like pretty much say about this. But we're here to talk about, privacy. And over the years, probably over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been talk of, different legislation coming in. The GDPR was a massive one. So I think it came into force about 2 years ago, but it was slated to come into force probably for about 2 years to that. So people knew it was coming, and it's a massive big deal because it basically puts people on, it alerts people to the fact that, if they get all this privacy stuff wrong, they could pay for it quite severely. And some big fines on offer here, large amount of your turnover, and that's turnover, not profit. And one of the companies that did get hit with a big fine fairly recently, within the last year or so, was BA. And one of the things that helped them was they sort of came clean about it, owned up a little bit, and I think that reduced the impact of the fine. And, we never know what's going to happen. Maybe they thought, it's a big fine, we'll generate the money back over the next couple of years. But look at them now. I mean, no one's flying anywhere. So maybe they're in a bit worse trouble than they thought. But then we got the California privacy protection. In Australia, we've just got a new act there, CPS 234, protects people here. And the Privacy Act, which came in 1993 in New Zealand, has gone through a few changes over the years, and there's a big update coming out at the minute, and that will take effect from December. But one of the things I think, I'd like to sort of point out here is just because these laws aren't happening in the jurisdiction where you are, doesn't mean really that you shouldn't pay attention to it. Because we can always look around and learn from other things. For example, people in California, although GDPR might not affect them, although it can affect them, but generally maybe it isn't. But they could look around at that piece of legislation and think, oh, you know what? There's things coming in there that are likely to come in where we are over the next couple of years. So we'd probably be well advised to pay attention. And I'll just draw a bit of an analogy about a team I used to work in. And I'm not really talking about any sort of security or privacy here, just a piece of technology, basically. So I worked for a government department in New Zealand, and we dealt with some quite sensitive data. The rest of the organization was looking to basically move to the cloud or explore the possibility of moving to the cloud. Azure, they weren't going with AWS or anyone like that. They wanted to move to an Azure data center. But privacy regulations where I wasn't at, and it's just a coincidence that I'm talking about privacy. Privacy regulations said that the data I was working with couldn't leave the country, and there was no Azure data center in New Zealand at the time. So did that mean that the team I was working with, shouldn't venture into the Azure space or upskill themselves and kind of be left out of what the rest of the organization were doing? But we sat down with our team and we said, do we really want to look at this? Is it relevant? And we came to the conclusion that, yeah, it is. It was definitely relevant, despite the fact that we weren't directly going to migrate our stuff to Azure. And the reason being that, things were coming into the Azure product before they were coming into the box product, the on-premise product. Things like row-level security, dynamic data masking, things that could be really useful to us when they did come into the box product. So we kind of looked at that as an early release program, an early adopter program, if you like. And you could look at these regulations as the same thing. If regulations are changing in, Russia, or maybe not Russia, in America, or they're being tightened in Europe, looking around and seeing what is happening in that jurisdiction is probably a good idea, and it'll probably stand you in good stead and put you ahead of your competition when you have to adapt to those laws or whatever it is later on. So what are the consequences? The consequences can be quite, can put you out of business, basically. We talked about a big fine with BA back there. But they're probably big enough to maybe absorb that sort of thing. But other people aren't. And if it puts you out of business, it's not just going to impact you. It's going to impact, the people you work with who now haven't got jobs, all their families. The knock-on effects can be really quite severe. And security is not just the job of, IT staff in the back room. It should be kind of everybody's job. If you see a practice that's, you think is a bit dodgy or could be improved, say something to your manager. Like we talked about a learning culture before, and this should be part of the learning culture, the security culture, if you like. And that takes time, takes practice, getting that sort of thing into your team. And this is a quote I really like: practice makes permanent. Practice till you get it right, and practice till you can't get it wrong. And what do we mean by that? Obviously, that's to do with technology. But some of this privacy stuff can be quite tricky. For example, if you've got to change certificates on like TDE, if you've got to restore a database and put certificates in there, if you've got to restore your master database that's got your certificates and security features in, these are all possible. I'm sure vast majority of people on this listening to this could do that no problem. But could you do it off the top of your head? Or if you do have to do it, have you got like a run book you can go through? Steps you can do to implement that? Because if you probably got to do that sort of thing, you're probably going to be under a bit of pressure, and that's not the real time you want to be Googling. But let's move on to that and talk about something that might be a bit of an issue for all of us, and that is passwords. And it'd be really good to get away from passwords, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And there's so many sites that we go to nowadays that demand passwords, and having the memory to remember all of them could be a bit of a problem. Hopefully my internet's there. See it buzzing a little bit. Yeah, could be a problem to remember. It'd be absolutely ideal, like I say, if we could get rid of passwords and, just have identity. For example, when we log onto our computers, it picks up our identity. If we go to our company intranet page, it knows who we are. We've got an identity that is remembered. We don't have to put in a password. But we've got so many passwords around nowadays that how do we manage them? And this was a big question for me a while ago. I eventually ended up going with a password safe. I used them quite a bit before. I opted for one of the big companies. There's a few around. Well, there's more than a few around. I say LastPass, 1Password. They're probably the big ones, and it's worked wonders for me. I share it with my family, and that's how we manage our passwords now. And it allows me to make more stringent passwords, longer passwords. Don't even have to remember them. I remember very few passwords nowadays. Obviously, I need to now log onto my computer. But in general, I just don't remember them at all. I've got the audit. It's secured with my master password and a key that they gave me, which only I know. And I believe that even if someone got into those systems, they couldn't reverse engineer it because it's encrypted with some quite strong encryption. So if our applications could store passwords in such a way and access password safes, that would be absolutely ideal. And they can in fact do that. And so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to switch over and look at an application that can in fact do that. And so I'll just share my screen. Okay, so here we are, Azure Key Vault. And Key Vault is really used to store three pieces of data. Keys, basically secrets, digital assets that are to do with security. So in here you can store keys, asymmetric keys. You can store secrets. Now secrets are really free-form text, really passwords. And you can also store certificates. And you can access them securely. You have to authenticate via Azure Active Directory. So there's no certificate, there's no password needed to authenticate. And then you can drag your secrets out, your keys, your certificates, whatever you like, and then use them how you like at all. Now, Azure Key Vault is baked in to Azure quite heavily. You'll notice over here, I just went into one Key Vault to show that. That's a Key Vault I created myself probably about an hour before I came online. So there's nothing in there, but I just showed the keys, the secrets, the certificates that can be up in there. But these two vaults up here, I never created those at all. They were in fact created because I chose to create some cognitive services yesterday. And they create a vault behind the scenes that I can specifically use for to store passwords related to those applications that I'm created. So kind of like storage as well, where you might create a VM, and behind the scenes there's a secure storage account and the like created to look after that for you. But there's also some other things that I want to talk about in here. And I talked about taking inspiration from other things. We've got policy, and we can define a policy to basically disallow something being created that doesn't fit that policy. And if we go over here and look at definitions, we'll see that there are in fact quite a lot of these policies pre-built into Azure. I mean, if we come down here, we'll see things from Canada. It's obviously things that are in preview here. ISO, compliance regulations, stuff from HIPAA, and the like. And you can create your own policies. And one of the things that we that probably you might want to link your policy to is tags. Now, if we look at basically any product around here, yeah, we see tags. So you could have, environment. Sorry, just say it. So we can have like environment. And, you could call it prop or UAT or whatever. And you could maybe say in your policy, if you go to create a virtual machine or whatever, and it's not tagged with an environment, then disallow the creation of it. And you can use tags for other things as well, like billing and subscriptions. So take some inspiration from there. Password safes in general for your own personal use and your families and your colleagues and that. Policy, I talked about Azure policy here, but you could have policy, within your workplace. The thing is, when it's kind of enforced, it seems a bit regimented. But computers have not got feelings; they don't have to make decisions. You say you're going to enforce the policy, you have to enforce it. Whereas, if it's a human being doing it, it might be a bit more of an emotional decision. Maybe it shouldn't be, but often it is. And, like we said about culture, that can come through maybe wrongly, and you end up getting created that you didn't want to create. So I'll finish sharing my screen. And we'll head back to the slides. Another thing I thought I'd mention while we're talking about tooling is actually rolling your own security mechanism. I've actually seen this done once it was actually done very well, but when they come to change their application, they were in big trouble, because what they wrote wasn't they couldn't take it to their new application. They couldn't bake it into their new application. And they were kind of stuck. So you've got to think, will you do a better job? And is it more cost effective to, and this can go for anything, not an authentication mechanism, anything you could build or buy. Are you going to do a better job? And if you are, who's going to take responsibility for that after it's created, when it's been around in the company for 2, 3, 5 years? Are people going to still use it? Who's going to look after it? It's probably not going to be the core business, so it's probably going to be a bit of a cost center and maybe a bit of a money and time sink. So standards, use standards. We have standard authentication mechanisms. We don't need to write our own. Although they're standards and everyone knows about them, they are particularly strong. There's large teams working on these, and using them is to your advantage. And so, yeah. So being a good corporate citizen and adhering to, a few good security practices. Obviously, someone's got to be trusted. And as a DBA, we are trusted quite highly, or a developer or whatever, to look after people's data. Often we're given too much trust, not too much trust, too much privilege. And what I mean by that is, as a consultant, sometimes I go into places and, I'll just need to do some performance tuning, or, not a high trust task, basically. Not a high trust task, sorry. Because I've got my headphones off, I was just thought someone might have been calling me, but they're not. So you go into places as a consultant, and you've got to do a small task, and you end up with like SA privileges, and you're like, I don't really need them. I never used to give it too much thought in the past, but over the last couple of years, I've been quite cognizant of saying, can you just give me the least privilege that the job requires? If something goes wrong while I'm in there, or I make a mistake, so obviously I do make mistakes. We all make mistakes. I don't want them to have a knock-on effect to something they shouldn't have. But also, if there is a data breach in that organization, I don't want to be in the frame as being a possible part of it. And having high privileges in production and things like that, where possibly you don't need them, just does put you in the frame. And that's not a great feeling for you. And obviously it wastes other people's time when they've got to investigate 30 or 40 people who had SA access in production when they didn't need it. And that sort of goes on to what I've called separation of concerns, which is obviously a development paradigm. But, if you're the DBA, maybe you don't need to see certain bits of data. If you're a developer just working in development, maybe you don't need to see certain bits of data there. So giving the right access to the right job role is pretty crucial nowadays, and it's becoming more and more so. So select the right tool for the right job. And it's 2020, so what would a presentation be without mentioning masks? Masks are not only critical in this day and age, but they are quite common and a good tool to use with security. So protect yourself, protect others, use masks. So what do I mean by that? Masks in the database. There's really two types. There's dynamic data masking and there's static data masking. So dynamic data masking will, think of your credit card mask. You look at your bank statement, you'll see the last 4 digits of your credit card number with the other 12 or so with X's there. That would be an example of dynamic data masking, or having a burst mask or something, basically replacing one set of characters with a completely different set of characters that are kind of irrelevant, really. But static data masking is a little bit different, and probably something you might want to look at if you've ever moved a database from from production back into development. So when we do that, we because sometimes that might be needed. But do we want the data that existed in production in development? And we probably don't. Not the exact data anyway, but we do want something that looks like the production data. So basically running a process over the production data and changing things like names, phone numbers, personally identifiable data, things that, compliance like GDPR, and that tells you to change. But also things that you might want to change within your company. You might have things that exist in your business process that are totally private and confidential, and you want to change them. So Redgate have actually got a tool for this, and it's called Data Masker. I've just got it down here, so I'll share my screen again. And I've got 2 instances of it here. Now, the first one I've got is basically, it's just been created out of the box. I just want to show this to start off with, because this is what it would start with. This is kind of a vanilla look at it, if you like. And what you're going to do is you're going to change data in tables. So you've got a controller that controls the whole process. And then you've got 2 what we call trigger managers. And you can control how these work, but by default, they will basically turn a trigger off on the table, because obviously you're going to change data within that table, and you might not want triggers firing all the time, and then it will re-enable them at the end. So between the start and the end trigger, we're going to put our basically our processes between the two triggers. So let's have a look how we do that. So I'll get rid of that. And here's another one I set up previously. So we'll look at how I did that. I've got the opening trigger there and the closing trigger there. And first of all, I've got what we call substitution rule. And I'm going to take the rule for this. I'm going to take names, and I'm basically going to go through the entire database and change those to female first names. Now, clearly, I've probably got in the database more than just female names. I've probably got male names in there too, and names from other genders. But if I went through that a particular table and just changed every name to a female name, I'd be 100% confident that I'd changed everything in there. Now, clearly I might have changed male names to female names, and that's not a good thing. However, the next rule will take care of that, because I'm going to do pretty much the same thing, but what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to use a where clause. So I'm going to say on first names, change them to first names, but don't do everything. Put a where clause in where the gender is actually male. So if there is any other non-binary genders in the database that don't conform to male or female, we will catch them and they will be changed. So thinking about those kind of processes is definitely a good thing to do. Here we've got an email address. We'll change email addresses. Here we're changing it actually to a random address. It's actually in there somewhere. We're changing it to a random address. But what you can actually do with this product is you could use a regular expression like syntax to change the address to maybe something that looks and feels real. So if you change the name, say Martin Catherall to Fred Blogs, you might want to change the email to fred.blogs@mycompany.com. Something that looks and feels like it was a real email address. And finally, I've just got another process there to sync data through to another table. So in some tables, we might have duplication. For example, we might have first name and last name in our customer table, which we've got here. But we might have another table, say, called customer notes, which we've got down here, which has got first name and last name in there as well. So we've got a bit of duplication going on. But we don't want to change those two different names. We want to, if we change a name in one table, we want that to flow through to the corresponding name in the next table. And we can do that with Data Masker here. So there are some really quite advanced rules you can put in place with Data Masker. And if you can download this product, a trial version, you can try it out. See how it goes. Obviously, you can write your own stuff as well. Like we were saying previously, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe it isn't. A lot of people have put a lot of work into this product, and so it's probably going to do a better job than maybe you could do on your own. But give it a whirl, see what you think. You can classify in Management Studio as well. But it's definitely worth a look. And I'll just close that out and get back to the slides. Right, so now we're back to the slides. So for the last 20 minutes, we talked about classification there. And as well as doing classification, we talked about tags as well. As we create columns and tables, but mostly columns, we might want to tag that column as being sensitive, or to give people more information about that column. For example, it's a first name, it needs some sort of GDPR classification. It needs some other classification. It's an email address. It needs to be masked. It's a number. It's irrelevant. Nothing needs to happen. And we can do that with tags. And we'll look at Redgate data catalog in a minute, and we'll see how tags are handled in there. But SQL Server does have extended properties. They're part of objects within SQL, and you can store your own stuff in there. It's a valid thing to do. In later editions of a Management Studio, and you can actually classify data also. So that's worth looking into. But let's just flick over to my screen again, and let's have a look at Redgate data catalog. Redgate data catalog. When my screen eventually comes back, I don't need that, will it? So, okay, so this is my database server. I've got a development instance on my machine. And about an hour before I gave this presentation, I ran Redgate SQL data catalog across my instance of SQL Server, and I've got quite a lot of databases on there. We can see if I hover over there, it says not classified, 11,225. So what that's basically telling me is it's gone through the entire database, and it's worked out that I've got that many columns. Sorry, my instance. It's gone through my entire instance, and it's picked up every database, and it's worked out I've got that many columns in the database. And I've basically classified one of those columns as being confidential and GDPR. So let's have a look how I actually did that. So let's just click on that donut there, and we're going to see all the databases that I've got on my machine here. Got quite a lot of databases. And some of them have actually had classification suggestions tagged to them. Some have not. Basically, this probably look for things like, things with naming or email address or whatever, and it's made suggestions for those columns. So not everything has been made a suggestion for, but I can classify every single database if I want to. So let's just look at the database we use for Data Masker also. And let's click into there. And we'll see that it's going to select a list of tables and columns straight away. So this is the assignment table, and we can see that it's got various columns in here, and none of them at the moment have been classified. So let's classify one. Let's go for the top one, seeing as it's at the top. So we'll click on it, and we get the options to classify it over here. And it's an integer, so we probably don't want to, it's probably not sensitive at all. So we can probably leave that as none. It's, it's not. Is there an applicable regulation? No, there probably isn't. Does it have a classification scope? No, it probably doesn't. So we could probably leave that one now. Just select it. Or just seeing as we're in a demo, just for demonstration purposes, let's say it's to do with banking. So let's apply those changes, and now we can see that the notes one is selected. That's been tagged as for banking. So let's basically select all of them. Sorry, I need to get rid of that before I do that. All on the page. And let's classify them there. Let's just say they're all, I don't know, they're all financial. Are they sensitive? Let's just imagine they were all GDPR. Applicable regulation. Yep, let's go for GDPR. And we can fill in whatever we like in here, and then just classify all the columns that belong in there. Obviously not done something right there. Just apply it to all 25 columns. Now, the tags that I have actually chosen there come out of the box, but that might not suit your needs, and you can create new ones yourself. And we call that a taxonomy. And if we go to the taxonomy tag, we can see a whole load of tags that have already been created, information type, sensitivity, and so on. If we can create our own, if we want to, we can just say a new category. We might call this original source. And we'll put that in. And then we might want to tag something in there. So we'll say, I don't know, purpose. And now we could tag the column with that. Now, you don't have to go through these one by one. You can get suggestions and then go through the suggestions and pick things out. Obviously, you don't want to be going through a database that's got, thousands and thousands in columns one by one. So you can probably use, you can use regular expressions and the like to search for columns. Let's just pick that database back again. Maybe columns that, search by data type, because maybe columns that are integers don't need to be tagged as not sensitive at all, because effectively, I don't know, there's not many integers that are that need to be tagged. We can search for things with tags. We can do a whole load of other things. But the point is that this SQL data catalog will allow you to add additional metadata to your columns. And then once that has been added, we can run checks against that database to say, are all the columns that we've tagged as sensitive, have they had process A carried out, or if the application sees a column that's marked as sensitive, take some sort of action to either do something or not do something. And the sensitivity from here, those labels, they can pull things into data masker that we've seen previously. So you can kind of do a very similar thing in data masker, but it's nowhere near as advanced as this tool here. So in this tool, you might say, I'll tag all my columns as sensitive that I need tagging, all my personally identifiable information. And then I can use that information to create a masking set in data masker. And that can be used to basically go through the database and mask the data in there. So that can be a really good tool to get to know. So I'll just finish off sharing my screen and go back to the slides. To do that sort of thing, it is kind of important to have a process. I mean, if you are taking data from production back to development, I mean, what are the steps you might want to do? Back the database up, restore the database somewhere, look at the database for everything that's marked sensitive, mask that field, take action on other fields that might be marked as sensitive also. Do whatever you like, and you might want to run that process in a sanitized environment. You might not want to be bringing your production data back into maybe your development environment and doing the masking there, because that's obviously maybe a flaw in the process. Whoever's looking at it, maybe no one's looking at that data. but you've had production data outside of a production environment. So maybe you back the database up to a sanitized environment, an environment that's not online, that no one had access to, bar this automated process. Do your masking in there. Maybe you want to do something a bit more than masking as well. Maybe you want to identify fields with pictures in them, and maybe you want to delete all the pictures. It is interesting, just a little detail here. AI can now generate pictures of people that have never existed. So you can basically get a load, if you need to put pictures in your database, generate a load of pictures of people that have never, ever walked the face of the earth, and put those into the database and use them if you do need pictures. I've seen pictures be quite a problem, not just in the fact that they contain images, but in the fact that they obviously contain metadata to do with maybe the person's name is in there, to do with where the picture was took, metadata that is sensitive in itself. And as well as pictures, you might see that in, XML columns, in JSON columns, in, columns that are free text. So it is a bit of a nightmare, nightmare might not be the right word, but bringing data back from production and putting it in development is fraught with a bit of danger. What I would prefer to have is maybe a bit of a utopia, is for an organizations to generate that database themselves. So instead of getting, a production database and changing it, to actually generate the data themselves, to start with a clean, fresh database that, it's got no data in, but is effectively a production database, and generate data in there, generate names, generate phone numbers, generate everything you like. And then, you can be pretty sure that none of that data, nothing slipped by you, that what is in that data is not too sensitive. So that's a big deal. I guess that's been with us a long time and will continue to be a bit of a problem, an issue, a pain point for all of our organizations. But there's a whole load of other tools you can use, both in the box and from third parties. Mentioned row-level security before. That came into the product, I think, probably about 4 or 5 years ago. Made its way into Azure SQL first, and then obviously ended up in, I think, 2016 when it came out. Transparent data encryption will encrypt your data at rest. And when you create a database in Azure SQL nowadays, it has transparent data encryption on by default. Microsoft will manage that key for you. You don't have to do anything at all. You can just leave it. They'll manage the changing of that key, full management. Well, you don't need to do anything whatsoever at all. However, you do have the option of managing it yourself, should you wish to do so. Obviously, it is a big deal, managing that yourself and taking that responsibility on. But, maybe some of your compliance, HIPAA, things like that, will mandate that you have to do that. And that's, it's got a cost. All the security stuff has a cost. Obviously, that's an example that it's going to take you person hours, and someone's got to pay you for that. You got to pass that on to your customers. All this stuff has a big effect financially on other people, and I would imagine flows through into the economy. Prices are going up and down, and I guess we could debate this for a long time. But security, privacy, all this sort of thing, it's got a big cost associated with it. SQL audit. We've got audit. We can audit SQL Server. in the cloud and on premises. Now, that's not going to stop anyone doing anything they shouldn't be doing, but it is going to keep a record of what's been done. And I guess like a security camera in your house, in your shop, it acts as a good deterrent to anyone who wants to do anything they shouldn't be doing. Like I say, auditing and monitoring, they give you access to know about things that have happened that maybe shouldn't have happened previously. So I'll just summarize quickly and then hand back to Kendra. I'll put my headphones on.
Hey, there you are. Yeah, you've got about 4 minutes left, so you're doing great. We got a couple good questions if you want to fit them in, or you could handle them in the Q&A panel after you finish, your choice.
We can do either. We can go for those questions now if you're on camera.
Okay, cool. If they're really, I think they're really good ones. So the first question is, how do you mask the data? Do you do dynamic masking or static masking? Is it encrypted with an algorithm? Okay, so static masking is not encrypted. It's not encrypted with an algorithm at all. It's basically just changing the data from one readable format to another readable format. So say the name Kendra Little becomes Kathy Freeman or something like that. Because the last thing you want to do is put your production data in development and then have a encrypted value that you couldn't read. That would just make no sense to anyone. So to answer the question, no, it's not encrypted. It's basically just changed. Yeah. And that's, I get this question a lot. I totally get, it's a really good question. So I'm glad that one came up. The other question is data masker able to find the same strings from multiple tables without foreign keys between the tables so that even if your database isn't fully normalized, the data would be consistent between two tables? So I guess it would be like, let's say the name Kendra Little was in two different tables, but there wasn't a foreign key between them. Could you change it into the same values if there's no foreign key?
Yep. So, data masker will you can use rules to make the data consistent. So the example I gave, maybe I didn't get it across right. Maybe you've got two separate tables. You've got first name and last name in one, and you've got a similar record with the same first name and last name in another table. Now, clearly, if you change the name and the name up here, you want it to change to exactly the same name down here. And you can make rules to do that, because obviously if you didn't do it, it wouldn't really look and feel like your production data. So it is crucial that you have consistency in data, not consistency in a database sense, consistency in if you change this and it flows onto this, then that will be changed too. And so that's part of your process, but it's something you can definitely do with data masker, and it's also something you can do with foreign keys to flow data changes through. And hopefully that answers the question. Okay, sorry, I can't hear you, Kendra. I can see you talking.
That's because I forgot to unmute myself. Sorry about that. That's a classic, isn't it? I just wanted to let folks know that even though we're changing topics, if they think, sometimes after a session ends, like 5 minutes later, you come up with a good question. If folks put a question in the Q&A box later, could we send it to you and then you could get back to them if they do have even more questions? Because those were really good ones. And I think they, like it says here, take inspiration when you see it. I think this may inspire people.
Absolutely fine. I'll put it in a blog post or something like that. But I guess I'll just leave you with one thought. Look around at other things, see how other things are working, take inspiration from them. Just because you're not using them doesn't mean they're irrelevant. Thanks for listening to me.